Hello again. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about the topic of public opinion polling. This is a topic that's covered in Chapter 6 in your book. A lot of times when I discuss this with students, I'll get the question, well, how do I know that a poll that I'm seeing in the news or on television is accurate? And the answer is you really don't know 100% for sure that it is accurate. But there are some steps that a polling organization can take to ensure that their poll gets relatively close to what the broader public is thinking in the results. First of all, it's not really feasible to interview all the adults in any given population, whether that population is the United States, the state of Michigan, the city of Detroit, or even the city of Dearborn. The idea is that you're talking about, in the case of the state of Michigan and the U.S. population, millions of people, and in, say, a city like Detroit, hundreds of thousands of people. And so it's just simply not feasible to interview all of those people. The reality is that most people in those populations may not even answer the survey, and there are all kinds of practical difficulties in trying to question that many people about a given topic, particularly since polls are done on a relatively regular basis. So in any poll, whether it's scientific or not, you're relying on a sample of people. The sample is a subset of that population. It's a small group of people within that population who are being asked to voice their opinion on some topic. Now, the way in which a scientific poll is done is the polling organization interviews a random sample of people. A random group of people would be people who were chosen without any regard to whether they met certain criteria, specific criteria, but rather that anyone in that population should have an equal and known chance of being picked to participate. The idea is you want to make sure that anyone in that population has some chance of being picked, and that one person's chance of being picked to participate is equal to anyone else's chances to participate in the survey. Because what you're trying to do is get a cross-section of the public. You want to get people from all races, all religions, all genders, all ethnic backgrounds, all walks of life, income levels, education levels, because you have all of that in your broader population. And as is discussed in your chapter, there are oftentimes some differences between how, say, one gender looks at an issue versus another gender, or how people of different races look at the same issue. Now, that, of course, is not to stereotype or generalize, because we are all unique, but certainly if you look at statistical data about populations, there are a lot of commonalities among people of a certain race or a certain religion or a certain gender and how they look at certain issues, okay? So you want to get that cross-section of the public in your sample. The best way to do it, again, is to interview people randomly so that anyone in that population has an equal chance of being picked. But if you do that statistically, and again, this is not a statistics course, so if you take that in the future, or maybe you've already taken a statistics course, you learn more about how these numbers work out and how you measure and so forth. But statistically, if you interview somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 people at random from a given population, then the result of your survey should be within about 3 to 4% of what you would have gotten had you been able to interview everybody in that population. If you're able to interview every single person in a given population, there is no sampling error. Now, there could be false answers given by people in the survey, but if you interview every single person in a population, you've got the entire population. There's no measurement of sampling error. You've got exactly what the population thinks. But if you're interviewing anything less than the full population, there's going to be some gap between what the population would think on that issue and what your sample is saying. But statistically, if you interview between 1,000 to 2,000 people at random from that population, no matter how large the population, you're going to be within about 3 to 4% of what the broader population actually thinks. Now, obviously, we have no way of knowing for sure if this is correct, but you can certainly look at multiple polls done, say, of public opinion of the president, no matter who the president is. And usually most polling organizations doing their surveys at the same time get approximately the same results, usually within a few points of each other, even though they're interviewing different groups of 1,000 to 2,000 people. So again, it doesn't prove that this is correct, but it's very rare for a reputable polling organization that's using these measures of surveys to get wildly different results. One other issue that sometimes people think about and ask the question about is, well, how did the polls get things so wrong in the 2016 presidential election? Because as you know, most media organizations polls were saying that Hillary Clinton was going to be elected president, and in fact, Donald Trump won the election. Well, a couple things to keep in mind. One is that the presidential election is not based on the national popular vote. It's based on who wins each state. And Donald Trump did win enough states to win a majority of the Electoral College votes. But keep in mind, he did not win the overall popular vote, and a lot of the polls that were being reported at the end of the campaign were focused on the national popular vote. And they showed Hillary Clinton winning over Donald Trump by several percentage points. And in fact, she did win the popular vote by about 2 percentage points. So the national polls were not wildly off. There was some variation in the polls at the state level, but the national polls were not terribly far off. So that's something to keep in mind. Certainly there were problems, and I think it's important that media organizations do their best to educate people about what's in the polls and how they did the poll and that sort of thing. But again, scientific surveys can be done. One other problem that does arise, and this may have come up in last year's election, is that some people may not want to say who they're voting for in an election, particularly when you have a controversial candidate like Donald Trump. Maybe some of the Trump voters didn't want to tell a pollster that they were planning to vote for him. And the other issue that has come up more frequently in recent years is that a lot of polling organizations, almost all of them actually, rely primarily on telephone calls. In the past, they could call landlines and get a good cross-section of the public, but we all know that more and more people are cutting their landlines and relying on cell phones. And if a polling organization is not relying on some cell phones or a lot of cell phone calls, then they're not going to get a very good cross-section of people. And one final thing is that there's a lot of non-response. A lot of people simply don't answer the phone if they don't recognize the number. And so polling organizations sometimes have to call more and more people to get to the number of 1,000 to 2,000 because they're getting a lot of hang-ups or no answers. And there could be differences between the people who agree to answer the phone when they don't know the number versus those who just let it go to voicemail. So there are all kinds of issues that have come up with polls in recent years. Again, we don't know how much of that explains the reporting about last year's campaign, but certainly there are issues that have come up. So again, please read the information carefully. It is a topic that a lot of people have questions about. A lot of people say, I don't trust the polls. And certainly there are questions about the accuracy of some polls. But if you are looking at a major media poll, say CBS or CNN, or one even done by Fox News, which some might think would be more conservative, their media polls tend to be pretty accurate or pretty close to what the broader population is thinking within a margin of error. So again, please read these pages carefully. If you have any questions, email me, and I hope you have a great week. Thanks.